Hi, my name is Nicholas Bell, and it is my pleasure to speak with Gudmundur Arnar Gudmundsson for his new film, Beautiful Beings, which is Iceland's official submission for the Best International Feature category at the 95th Academy Awards. So first of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I have, this is the second time I've seen the film. It premiered in the Berlin Film Festival in the Panorama. So the novelty of getting to watch it again relatively soon after I saw it for the first time was kind of like, it felt like a dream to me, a very dark, almost maybe a nightmare because it's a very dark film. And there are a lot of dreamlike sequences in it, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but I want to commend you on being able to really authentically represent this separation between adolescents and adults, because I feel like a lot of films don't really do that. And I was wondering if you could first talk about your approach to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with this kind of theme of youth, adolescents, and kids since I started with my short films. And there's something in those years that I really enjoy reconnecting to, but also I had quite turbulent teenage years myself. And I remember, my parents and people in school and so on didn't really have any clue what was going on within our life. It was kind of like a double life, with the one that they knew about and then the one they didn't see. And I always remembered kind of wanting to be able to share that with, both the good sides and the bad sides. Sometimes I needed help but couldn't reach for it. And sometimes I also wanted them just to see, that those boys are pretty special, even though they behave, or have that tendency of behavior.
Yeah, a question that you asked kind of in your own director's statement about the film was also really resonant with me about can boys who seem like bad influence still be good friends? And I think your film obviously answers that, but it resonates with me in my own experiences as a teenager in a different part of the world. So I also read that you were having dreams. That's kind of the inspiration for this project. And I know you studied screenwriting, so if you can talk about how the project originated and how it kind of came together.
Yeah, after my first feature, Hearthstone, I really didn't want to repeat myself. So I thought, oh, now I have to do a film about grown-ups. And then I kept having this almost nightmarish dreams about a certain period in my teenage, years, where I was acting quite violent, and my friends as well. And I kept just having this, dreams about that period. And I kept pushing it away because I didn't want to go into that theme. But then one day I decided to sit down and start writing kind of a little bit kind of memories and moments and stuff like that. And then it just kind of opened like a flood. And I realized, hey, there's actually a great story here and very interesting characters that I have to continue and explore and write about. But the film is fiction still, I want people to know that.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And again, I think it is a lot darker than Hearthstone, which I've also just rewatched as well. And again, there are points of comparison because we're talking about coming of age at a certain point in youth, if you will. But it feels like a much different film. And you even using the same cinematographer, Sturla Brandt Grovlin, who's very notable Norwegian cinematographer. I know that you have said you've had a very close collaboration with him. Can you talk about the visual approach and how that changed from Hearthstone?
Yeah, I mean, in Hearthstone, that's shot in the countryside in a small town where the nature plays a major role. It's almost like a third character in every scene, the nature, and that's how it is living so close to the nature in Iceland. It influences your life a lot. And now it's in Reykjavik, the city, and the nature doesn't really play such a big role, and so we had to kind of discover our visuals, and kind of the poetry more within the housing and the rooms we are in, and the streets of Reykjavik.
Beautiful Beings feels almost more claustrophobic to me, being
Mm.
in the city and so closely focused on these, especially the four young boys.
Yeah.
Where I was kind of missing the escapism of nature of Hearthstone, and
Mm.
how animals and nature factor into beings. Beautiful Beings is there are really kind of terrible things happening to animals, but they're kind of off screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I read you also where you were influenced by Inarritu and The Sopranos, especially if you want to talk about the kind of the dream sequences, because Adi's mother is clairvoyant in the film, and how you work that, I thought, very well and subtly into the fabric of the film.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw, for example, Beautiful by Inarritu, I was deeply touched by how he approached the supernatural elements of the main character. He's clairvoyant in the film, and I thought it was the first time I've seen this done in a film where I really connected to it, because in Iceland we have this, it's quite strong element in Iceland, people discussing their dreams, believing in them, and even the intuition, and all that. And mostly when it's portrayed in films, it becomes like it takes over the story, but there it was just like a side story in the film itself. And I wanted that for Beautiful Beings as well. I wanted that to be a side story, something that influences the main character, helps him discover that even though he loves his friends, he has to leave this path and kind of stand on his own. Yeah, and I was kind of in that sense, and I saw Sopranos. I watched the whole TV series and I loved it. And
Yeah.
I saw moments in Sopranos where he was having a dream about his friend, and I think the dreams are quite accurate, revealing something that he maybe knew subconsciously, or
Right.
maybe not, but it's giving him, it's helping him.
I think in the journey for the character of Adi in the film, I really like how it's kind of building on how teens learn to be empathetic, because
Yeah.
he's really very kind of cruel and callous towards Bali at first, in how there's this toxic edge to their relationship that becomes very poignant and meaningful, and helpful to both of them, which I really liked. For American films dealing with teen boys, there aren't too many examples that kind of hit as heavy as this. But I was, of course, reminded of Stand By Me, or Kids, a little bit. Were any of those? I'm curious about any other inspirations in the back of your head.
But both of those films you mentioned, Stand By Me, that's like a overall inspiration every time I'm working, because I think it's such a beautiful crafted film, both storytelling wise and the characters. And I think the characters reveal so much of, how young kids are. Kids, there's this edge in kids, this kind of liveness, explosiveness, that I think portrayed very well the behavior of teenagers. So both of those films kind of influenced, and we discussed them, me and Sturla, my cinematographer, and also a little bit Gummo by Harmon Corrine.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, there are like hints of that. I loved that film when I saw it the first time.
Yeah, same. Yeah, Harmony Korine. Yeah. So for Hearthstone, I know that, I believe that you had kind of the young cast through kind of an 8-month acting course. And did you have a similar approach with your cast in this?
Yeah, the same approach. And now we actually had to add on a little bit, because in Hearthstone, the kids are kind of playing characters that are, most of them, kind of close to themselves.
Sure.
But this time in Beautiful Beings, all of the boys and almost all of the characters are playing characters, or actors are playing characters that are quite far away from them in real life. And so we had to build, up a little bit on that, but also just on the support system so we would not influence the kids in a negative way, bringing them into into this world and in this behavior. So we had to kind of make sure that would be a positive growing experience for them, but not the opposite.
Right. And I liked your statement about intimacy coaches, actually, because, there's some violence, sexual violence and rape, and, with kids of this age filming that. I like that you said it feels like we always should have had that.
Yeah. And also for me as a director, it's so liberating, both I think the process of doing the in this intimacy coaching way, just the process is great, and the end result is great for what we get on the camera, but it's also the liberating that I'm sure I'm not pushing anyone into a situation where he doesn't want to be in.
Right.
And yeah. I think it's like I don't really understand why it didn't come long time ago.
Yeah. It's interesting in retrospect to think on that.
Yeah.
And so crafting these characters with these kids, most of whom I believe this is kind of their first major acting experience. And as a screenwriter, how did your script change as you navigated this with them?
I mean, I spent so much time on the script that it's pretty locked in stone when I start working with the actors. But what they bring is a lot of the kind of movements and behavior within the scene, and kind of, refreshing my mind of being how it is to be a kid. So it's more, I think, the liveliness that they bring, but maybe like what they say in the scenes is the same. They kind of rephrase it maybe a bit to their own wording, but it's more the kind of the energy and liveliness that they bring that influences the script. So maybe a scene that I thought would be smaller becomes a bit bigger because of their input into it.
I asked that because there's, in both Heartstone and Beautiful Beings, there's kind of a sense of discovery in watching it, it captures that feeling of how those moments feel, which doesn't feel rehearsed.
No, and I think that's a lot to do with the process of how we shoot it with Sturla, because we give them the freedom to improvise their movements within the scene, and Sturla kind of follows them, and it almost becomes like a dance between Sturla, the actors, and me. So we're kind of discovering the scene while we're shooting it. It has the same, lines, in and out point, but how we execute it, we're kind of all discovering it together.
And I also, there's a really interesting subtext, obviously, about masculinity and the performance of masculinity. But I really like how we have these young boys who, the return of the two father figures is really what kind of causes the third act climax, which I really liked. And that's where you have Olafur Darri Olafsson as Bali's stepfather, who's, I think, a lot of American audiences should probably readily recognize. But was that always part of the climax, is these two father figures coming in, and that's what's going to cause this tragedy?
More with Olafur, the father of Bali. Like he comes in, and he was always like the part of the kind of the climax. And for me, it's a little bit about like a foreshadowing, the older boys in the story, this is what they will become in few years if they continue. Olafur is the kind of the end result, if they continue. About Addi's father, for me, that was always just a little kind of relief, like a little break, little break in that film, because it's been quite intense. And it's like a little breathing room, and gives us a clear connection to Addi for a moment before we continue.
Right. I think it's doing that. It's doing a lot at least, I was thinking he's also so frustrated at the absence of his dad, and all of those feelings, which, psychologically make sense for why he does what he does in protecting Bali. So all around, just a very impressive portrait of these kids. I read that for your next feature, you're going to try something lighter with the fairy tale.
Yeah, I mean, I want to explore the supernatural element further. I don't know, either it's going to be something for the family, or it will, be a little darker. I'm not sure yet.
Right.
Yeah, like a darker in a different sense, not violence, but more supernatural elements.
Well, a lot of original fairy tales are actually really dark.
Quite dark, yeah.
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 And I think you could even read Beautiful Beings, I think, is kind of a contemporary fairy tale. Those elements are all there metaphorically,
Yeah.
which is interesting. But thanks for taking the time to speak with me, and congratulations on your film and the various awards it's picked up, and the distinction of being the submission is, quite important.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Okay.